Hello. How are you? Thank you so much for coming back. If it's your first time here, who are you? Why US signs look different than the rest of the world's. By half as interesting. Now, I know from experience. I've watched at least one of this guy's other videos. They always throw in some curveballs. Like, you never know when he's being sarcastic or serious. It's a really fun channel. Go check it out. Link down below. Anyway, why US signs look different than the rest of the world's. I didn't know they did. It would be nice if we had like a universal street sign language, you know? It would also be nice if we all had a universal measurement system. Someone needs to invent that.
Most places in the world, the road sign for no stopping, as in don't stop your car here, looks something like this. In Austria, it looks like this. In Belgium, it looks like this. Slightly different shades of blue, but basically the same. India's looks like this, Mauritius's looks like this. In a few countries there are these cute white borders. Japan's looks like this, slightly different.
I'm trying to think. I don't even know what the no stopping sign looks like in America.
Different angle, but basically the same. Pretty much every country in the world has universally decided that the sign for no stopping
I've never
is a
seen
blue
that sign.
circle outlined in red with a red X through it. In the United States, the sign for no stopping looks like this. And it's not the only example. Most countries' sign for speed limits looks like this.
No stopping on pavement. I'm just laughing at that. It's like, I don't know if I've ever seen that sign. It looks so generic. There's nothing to remember about it. I think I have seen it, and it's just kind of funny. Like, why does it say pavement? Why doesn't it just say no stopping? No stopping on pavement. But if you pull off into the grass, you're fine to stop, or what? I guess so.
The US's looks like this. And how about the sign for road?
I like our speed limit sign.
For speed limits looks like this.
I wouldn't know what that meant. I would think that's like the name of the road or something.
The US's looks like this. And how about the sign for road narrows? The rest of the world, America.
I didn't know we had a sign for that once again.
The list,
but I do like the other one over here. I like the ones that don't require, your guys's don't really require any words.
Goes on. The question is, why? In a technical sense, the car was invented in 1886 in Germany by a guy named Carl Benz. But in a patriotic sense, the car was invented in 1908 in Detroit, Michigan by a guy named Henry Ford.
I think people in the US do get that kind of mixed up. Thinking, I mean, he invented the assembly line from what I understand. I'm sure someone had the idea to like get people in a row doing the same task over and over to make it more efficient. But he did that and it like really popularized that from what I understand, you know, and that's how cars became affordable.
Henry Ford loved two things,
I think.
Being anti-Semitic and producing cars at a scale and at cost that made them an actual viable means of transportation for people, as opposed to previous car models that were
And apparently he was anti-Semitic. I did not know that.
essentially just novelties. Soon, its manufacturing dominance turned the United States of America into the car capital of the world, which soon also made it into the road capital of the world.
It's kind of sad we're nowhere near that anymore. You know, we don't produce like anything in America. There are still car plants, just not nearly as many.
A fact that everyone thought was great and
Or
continues
maybe there's more. I don't know. Maybe there are more. There's just so many more people and cars in the world now that it's just less of a proportion is from America.
to think is great and has generated no controversy or existential urbanist crises whatsoever. Early road signs, much like early roads, were
I recognize all these channels. Well, actually, I need to go check out all these other channels. That sums up like what I like reacting to right there.
or existential urbanist crises whatsoever. Early road signs, much like early roads, were somewhat eclectic and decentralized, often just created by and maintained by private automobile clubs. But in 1927, the American Association of State Highway Officials, or ASHU, published the compactly named Manual and
Achoo!
Specifications for the manufacture, display, and erection of U.S. standard road markers and signs, or Massmedemersum, which, as you might suspect, created specifications
See, that was his little sarcastic. I knew he can't help himself sometimes.
for the manufacture, display, and erection of U.S. standard road markers
Erection.
and signs. Then, in 1930, a different group, the National Conference on Street and Highway Safety, or NUCSHUS, published the more urban-focused Manual on Street Traffic Signs, Signals, and Markings, or MOSTSAM. Seeing as having two standard
Is he serious? Do people actually call it that? See, I cannot tell with this guy.
Standardization standards wasn't a particularly standardized standard. In 1931, a joint committee was formed, which ultimately gave birth to a beautiful bouncing baby boy that we call the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, a modified version of which we still use today. The original 1935 McCood laid out such hits as the octagonal stop sign, although it was yellow at the time, one-way streets, railroad crossings, in addition to
A yellow stop sign. What an interesting. It looks weird.
specifying stuff like fonts, post designs, and of course, everyone's favorite, minimum vehicular volumes warrant for fixed time signals. Now it's 1951.
What?
And what's that sound I hear? Oh man, it's the rest of the world, and guess what? They have cars now. What's that other sound I hear? Oh man, it's the newly formed and not yet notoriously ineffective United Nations, and they want to develop a worldwide standard for road signs so that people driving in foreign countries don't see a sign saying railroad crossing, not know what that means, and then get pancaked into oblivion by Thomas and Friends.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, it would be like if we had a standard system for measurement. That would make sense too. Someone needs to invent this.
The UN set up an experiment in a few countries and 5 US locations. Ohio State Route 104 near Columbus, US Route 250, and Virginia State
This was here in America?
Route 53 near Charlottesville, Minnesota State Highway 101 near Minneapolis, and some various other roads in New York, where they displayed road signs from a number of different countries to see which were most effective. And not surprisingly, it turned out that Americans, still riding the entire
Nope, that one was not effective. They just got into a head-on collision with a train. Not effective. We'll try the one from Norway this week.
intoxicating high of World War II propaganda and American exceptionalism did not take kindly to European-looking triangles telling them how to drive. Just take a look at this gem of an article from the Mansfield News Journal titled "Ohioans Tell Europe to Leave Its Signs," which includes such quotes as, "I just don't see why we have to take any advice from Europe about our highway signs," and "If I saw a Russian sign, I certainly wouldn't pay any attention to it." Nonetheless, the experiment continued, data was collected, and ultimately that data would later grow into the 1968
Just because it's a Russian sign, it's still probably better for your health to pay attention to it.
Vienna Convention
For your well-being.
on road signs and signals, a C-tier Vienna Convention that created a universal road sign system, which has been joined by 69 countries and today governs the road signs seen in most of the world. It's the reason that all the no-stopping signs look the same. But adding to their long, illustrious history of spearheading international treaties that they then refused to sign, the United States refused to sign it. Why? Well, there are several reasons. First off, America's number one and nobody tells us what to do, least
Hell
of all,
yeah.
our own federal government. See, technically, legally, road
Except in like healthcare, education, happiness. No, I do like America.
roads are under the purview of the states, not the federal government, and so the federal government signing a treaty telling them how to handle their roads is a bit legally murky. Although apparently not that murky, seeing as the 1966 Highway Safety Act was able to force all states into compliance with the MUTKID using a clever little constitutional workaround called extortion, threatening to pull 10% of their federal highway funding
I've heard of that one.
if states didn't comply.
effective.
Second, at the time of the treaty, the US was starting to work on what would ultimately become the interstate highway system, which they felt would require a lot of breathless, fast-paced innovation in the rough and tumble world of road signage, and they didn't want to be bogged down by the strictures of a treaty. And third, given that the US had the most robust grooming history in the world, Americans were pretty attached to their existing signs, and they didn't much want them to change. This was proven in the 1970s when the MUTKID tried implementing the Vienna Convention's focus on image-based instead of America's more text-based signs,
Right, there it is. See, that's probably the biggest difference. Is that ours? I guess I never really noticed. It's kind of interesting how once you get used to what a sign looks like, you don't read it. But ours have all sorts of words on them. And it would really be better if they didn't require that. Although I'm thinking about the yield sign I saw the other day from the German video. And that looked just like a yield sign here, but I would be really... Like, I just don't know if I trust Americans to be smart enough to memorize all the signs. I think we got to have words on them here in America. I think it's a special case. There's a lot of... I don't know. Either that or we need to make the driving test harder.
which turned out to be a terrible failure, with drivers so confused about what things like this meant that we felt we needed to add back in the text explaining that the thing in front of them was a drawbridge, not a sick ramp for kids. In 1978, the MUTKID quietly removed its language about preferring image-based signs. I should also mention that, yes, there are a number of other countries that haven't joined the Vienna Convention, including China, Canada, Australia, and Ethiopia. So yes, not all other countries' signs look the same. So
Australia.
all the people with the comments already typed up about how this video is too US-centric and I'm a self-obsessed, egoist American road sign file, you know what?
Was that a stock video? Where did he find this? Or is that him?
About how this video is too US-centric and I'm a self-obsessed, egoist American road sign file, you know what? Actually, go for it. It increases common engagement. If you think back to a time when you really struggled to learn something, chances are you were reading a big block of text and hoping the concept
an
it
ad,
described
huh?
just clicked. Meanwhile, if you think of a time when you learned something easy,
It's an ad.
practice, are so often taught in such a challenging manner. Our sponsor,
I knew it.
and how neural.
It's kind of cool that he gets to do ads at the end of the video. That's cool. This guy's cool, you know? The advertisers will always say it needs to be in the first minute or at the beginning. So good for him. He's like, no. Putting it right at the end. Anyway, Americans don't feel the need to listen to anybody, at least to anybody, least of all their own federal government. Amen. That was fun. Quite interesting. Honestly, I didn't know the entire rest of the world was on board with these traffic signs. And it was just mostly, or not the entire rest of the world, but I didn't know there was any kind of universal traffic sign stuff going on. So I'm over here just in my American bubble. Typical. But it's good to know. That's interesting. I hope you guys have a phenomenal weekend and day, and come back next week.